My name is Ryan. I'm 28 years old. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I had just bought our first house together. It was one of those quiet, cul-de-sac neighborhoods, the kind where the streetlights hum softly at night and kids' bikes always seem to be abandoned on the lawn. We fell in love with the house instantly. It was an old two-story with white siding, a wraparound porch, and these huge bay windows that let sunlight pour into every room. Everything felt normal, safe, perfect, even. For the first few weeks, moving in was this whirlwind of unpacking, late-night pizza boxes, and arguing over curtain rods. But as we started to settle, I noticed something that I can't explain. One side of the house always felt a little off. I don't mean creaky floorboards or drafty corners, I mean the measurements just didn't make sense. The hallway between the living room and the bedroom seemed shorter than it should be, like the house was compressed in some subtle way. I chalked it up to old house quirks, but Sarah noticed it too. She would pause mid-step, glance around, and mutter, "That's weird." Weeks went by, and our unease grew slowly, almost imperceptibly. The first night it really hit me, was around 3:42 a.m. I woke up to get a glass of water, and the hallway looked different. The shadows were longer, stretching in odd angles across the carpet. I swear I could hear a faint scraping sound, like fingernails on drywall, but the house was otherwise silent. I shook it off, blaming my imagination. I didn't want to scare Sarah. It wasn't until one rainy Thursday that I found the closet. It was in the hallway near our bedroom, small, ordinary, nothing remarkable. But for some reason, I was drawn to it. I pushed the clothes aside, and my hand brushed against something hard behind the drywall. I paused, I felt around with my fingers and realized the wall wasn't solid. There was a sealed section, neatly cut, as though someone had wanted to hide whatever was behind it. My heart started hammering. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe it was old construction, maybe a utility panel. But something in my gut told me otherwise. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept picturing the wall, imagining a dark space, just waiting. The next day, I came home from work early, telling Sarah I wanted to check it out. We both wore gloves and grabbed a hammer. I started tapping on the drywall, softly at first, just to see if it sounded hollow. Then, slowly, the section gave way. Dust filled the air, sunlight from the hallway cutting through the haze like a beam in an abandoned cathedral. Behind it, there was a small, windowless room. The smell hit me first, damp, heavy, and almost metallic. There was an old mattress in the corner, stained and flattened, and a rusty bucket next to it. I froze, but then I saw the Polaroids. They were scattered across the floor, some stuck to the walls, some lying in stacks. My stomach turned cold as I picked one up. They were photos of us, sleeping, taken from angles that could only have been inside our bedroom. I flipped through more, my hands trembling. The images weren't old, some were from the night before. Sarah clutched my arm, her face pale, whispering, "Ryan, this isn't normal." I knew, right then, that someone had been inside our house while we slept. The thought that someone had been living in this hidden room, watching us every night, I can't even describe the terror. We called the police, of course, but there was no sign of recent activity, no fingerprints, no evidence beyond the photos in that room. We ended up moving out a week later. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that something is still there, waiting in that dark, hidden corner of the house. It's been 2 years since we left that house, but I still can't stop thinking about that room. Sarah and I tried therapy, tried to move past it, but sometimes late at night, I hear a faint scraping in my apartment walls. I know it's just the building settling, I tell myself, but the sound, it takes me right back. I've replayed every moment since we found the room, over and over. The way the drywall felt, rigid at first and then giving way like it had been waiting for me to find it. The mattress, the bucket, the smell, it's burned into my memory. But the Polaroids, those are the worst. Some of them were dated months before we moved in. Someone had been inside that house before us, lying in that tiny, windowless cell, watching whoever lived there next. And then, there's the most terrifying part. Some of the Polaroids showed us, but taken from angles that didn't exist in the house's layout. I still don't understand how that was possible. I've seen documentaries, read forums, tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an architectural trick. Maybe someone had built the house with secret tunnels. But none of it makes sense. Whoever, or whatever, was in that room, had access to us without ever being noticed. Every night. Every small sound, every movement, captured in a photograph, silently, obsessively. I told Sarah I wanted to go back, just once, to see if the room was still there. She refused. I didn't go, not yet. But some nights, I lie awake, staring at the corner of our bedroom, imagining the walls themselves watching, listening. I've started checking my apartment for inconsistencies, small spaces where someone could hide. I know it's irrational. But after that house, nothing feels truly safe anymore. The most haunting part, though, isn't the room. It's the thought of it. The idea that somewhere, behind walls we trust, there could be a space no one talks about. A space designed for watching, for waiting. I still dream about it. The darkness, the smell, the photos, the faint sound of a scraping bucket, just out of sight. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, I can swear I hear a soft click, like a camera shuttered. I don't know what will happen if I go back, if I ever find that house again. But the truth is, I can't stop thinking about the room they forgot to mention. And I don't think I ever will. My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old. About 6 months ago, my daughter Lily, who's 8, and I moved into a small rental house on the edge of town. It was nothing fancy, just a cozy little place with a fenced backyard and an old oak tree out front. Our landlord, a cheerful man in his 70s, handed me the keys and said casually, "Oh, the old man next door. He passed a few years ago. Nice guy, quiet. You won't hear much from him." I nodded, smiling politely, but the mention of him stuck in my mind. The neighborhood was silent, almost too quiet, but at first, everything seemed fine. The first strange thing happened within the first week. I had just made dinner, and when I went to serve Lily, a portion of her food was gone. Not a lot, maybe a few bites, but the plate had been disturbed. I told myself she might have snuck a bite before I got to her, but it left me uneasy. A few nights later, I noticed the back door, the one that had a simple latch lock, unlocked, even though I was sure I had locked it. I checked the locks repeatedly for days, convinced it was just me being forgetful. But then came the noises. It started with a faint humming at night, like someone humming a lullaby from far above. I live alone with Lily, and the sound seemed to come from the attic, but the attic was emptied. I couldn't see anything, and every time I tried to trace the sound, it would stop. I tried to brush it off as the wind or the house settling, but Lily started asking questions I couldn't answer. "Mom, did you hear that man singing again?" she asked one evening, eyes wide, clutching her blanket. My stomach dropped, but I told her it was probably just the heater or a bird in the attic, anything to calm her down. I wasn't sure what I would do if the truth came out. I couldn't explain that someone had been living next door, someone who supposedly passed away years ago. Then, I noticed things disappearing. Small items at first, a pair of scissors, a kitchen knife, some snacks, nothing valuable, but enough to make me paranoid. I started double-checking doors and windows before bed. And every night, that humming. It grew louder, more insistent, almost like someone was pacing. I installed a baby monitor in Lily's room, partly for safety, partly to capture what I thought might be my imagination. The first few nights, Nothing unusual happened, but on the third night, I caught movement. Through the monitor, I saw a shadow crawl across the vent above Lily's bed. At first, I thought it was a trick of the camera, maybe a shadow from the ceiling fan. But then, a hand appeared. Pale, emaciated, grasping the edges of the vent. I froze. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst. I watched, paralyzed, as an old man, skeletal and ragged, climbed slowly out of the vent. His eyes were wide, almost desperate, and he was staring straight at the camera. That's when I realized this wasn't the ghost of someone who passed quietly years ago. This was the neighbor who never left. I screamed. I don't even remember how I found my voice. Lily, asleep in her bed, didn't wake at first, but I grabbed her and bolted from the room, tripping over toys in the dark. I called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The dispatcher asked me to stay calm and lock the doors. I didn't even think. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and waited by the back door. I didn't hear him following. I didn't hear him at all. It was almost as if he had melted into the shadows around the house. When the police arrived, they inspected the vents, the attic, the crawlspace beneath the house. They found evidence that made my skin crawl, a network of tunnels and crawlspaces that ran through the house's foundation, vents leading directly into bedrooms and living spaces. And in one corner, curled up under a thin, filthy blanket, was the man. He was alive, but barely, emaciated, skin gray, eyes wild with fear and something else I can't name. They said he had been living there for years, moving silently through the vents and crawlspaces, observing anyone who moved in. They said he had no family, no visitors, and somehow, he survived without anyone noticing for years. I stayed with Lily at a friend's house for weeks after that. We couldn't go back. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind through the vents, sent my mind spinning. I still can't shake the feeling that he was always watching, always just beyond sight. I've moved twice since then, and even now, every vent in our walls makes my stomach knot. I check doors obsessively, and when I hear faint sounds in the night, I can't help but wonder if someone is still out there, waiting in a hidden space, watching us. The thing that haunts me the most isn't the man himself. It's the thought that someone could live in your house, in the shadows, unseen, unnoticed, for years. That someone could watch your life unfold without you ever knowing. I still check under Lily's bed every night, every vent, every corner. Sometimes, when the house is quiet, I swear I hear that faint hum, just like that night. And I know it will never leave me. The neighbor who never left, well, he almost never leaves your mind either. My name is Sarah. I'm 21 years old. A few months ago, I moved into a basement apartment near my college campus. It was cheap, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of mildew, but it was affordable, and I had a roommate situation lined up upstairs with the landlord. The landlord, a wiry man in his late 50s with a permanent smirk, handed me the keys and said casually, "Just ignore the boxes in the corner of the basement. Don't touch them. They're private." I laughed nervously, nodded, and told myself I wouldn't touch them. It was the kind of thing that sounded ridiculous in retrospect, but at the time, I just wanted to move in and start school. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked, arranged my desk, and tried to make the space feel like home. But almost immediately, I noticed odd sounds at night, faint rustling from the corner where the boxes sat stacked against the wall. I blamed rats at first. I had lived in old apartments before. This sort of thing happens. But the rustling grew louder over the weeks. It would start around 2 a.m., sometimes earlier, sometimes later, always faint, like something shuffling inside the cardboard. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to call the landlord or freak out, because honestly, I just wanted to pass this off as a weird, harmless noise. One night, I woke up to a loud thump. The boxes had shifted slightly, one leaning precariously against the wall. I swear I saw movement in the corner, just a shadow, barely distinguishable, and froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought my roommates upstairs might hear me. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, but the sound of rustling continued for weeks, and my sleep became fitful, full of dreams where I was being watched, and those boxes were staring at me from the darkness. I started leaving a small lamp on, hoping to keep the shadows at bay. Finally, after 3 weeks of near-constant anxiety, I decided to deal with the boxes myself. I grabbed a box cutter, my phone's flashlight, and approached slowly. Dust hung thick in the stale air, motes floating like tiny specters. The boxes were taped up tightly, heavy, as though filled with something dense. I hesitated, a sick feeling twisting in my stomach. But curiosity, mixed with terror and a desperate need to regain control, pushed me forward. I sliced the tape on the top of the first box and peered inside. Inside were VHS tapes, stacked neatly, each labeled with women's names and dates, some from decades ago. My stomach dropped. I pulled one out at random. The label read my own apartment's address, and a date that was last week, the day I moved in. My hands were shaking as I inserted it into an old VCR I found tucked behind some shelves. The footage started, and I couldn't breathe. It was me, unpacking my things, arranging furniture, completely unaware. And then, the horrifying part, the camera angle. It was filmed from the vent above my bed. Someone had been watching me from the moment I walked in. I dropped the tape, my hands trembling uncontrollably. My phone rang almost immediately. Caller ID showed the landlord's number. I answered with a trembling voice. "Did you move anything you weren't supposed to?" he asked, smiling through the phone in that same unsettling way. My stomach turned to ice. I stammered, trying to get words out, but he hung up before I could respond. That's when it all hit me, the boxes, the tapes, the rustling. He had been watching every tenant who ever moved in, recording them, hiding evidence of it in those boxes. And now I was next. I called the police, and they came to inspect the basement. They found a small crawl space behind the stacked boxes, just large enough for a person to slip through. In it, they found a tiny network of hidden vents, all leading directly to my apartment, all wired for camera placement. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing except the subtle, invisible ways he had monitored me. I still can't believe it. I don't think I'll ever feel safe in a rental again. Every vent, every corner, every box in storage now makes my skin crawl. I moved out immediately. I didn't even look back. But sometimes, late at night, when I think the apartment is empty, I swear I hear faint rustling, like tape peeling, or someone moving boxes around, just out of sight. I check the locks obsessively. I check the vents. I think about the other tenants who probably never noticed, who never knew. And I shiver. Because the boxes in the basement, they're more than boxes. They're a warning. And I'll never forget the day I opened them. Even now, years later, I can't walk past a basement or storage room without that sick feeling in my stomach. I keep telling myself it's over, that the man is gone. But somewhere, in some corner of some apartment, the next set of boxes waits. And I know, someone will open them. And they'll watch. And they'll never see it coming. My name is Michael. I'm 27 years old. A few months ago, I bought my first house, a small, foreclosed property on the outskirts of town. The kind of place that needed a little work, but it had character and an unreal price tag. Moving in felt like a fresh start. I spent the first few days unpacking boxes, running to hardware stores, and trying to make the place feel like home. Everything was normal, until the first letter arrived. It was tucked neatly in the mailbox, a simple white envelope, no return address. On the front, in delicate cursive, it said, "Welcome home, Michael." I laughed it off. Maybe a neighbor trying to be friendly or some harmless prank. I opened it, expecting some cheesy note, but it was blank. That should have been the end of it, but then more came. A few days later, another envelope, same style, same lack of return address, with a line written inside, "I saw you make coffee this morning." I froze. My heart sank. No one should know when I make coffee. I checked the street, scanned the houses nearby, but it was quiet, silent. Over the next week, the letters kept coming. Each one was oddly specific. "You left the front door unlocked yesterday," or "Your favorite chair is by the window." It was like someone was watching every moment of my day. I considered calling the police, but I didn't have proof yet. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a neighbor with binoculars or some delivery person who noticed my routines. But it didn't feel harmless. Each envelope carried a weight, a sense that I was being followed, that my life was under a microscope. I became obsessed with the mailbox. I watched it from the kitchen window, trying to catch whoever was leaving the letters. I even installed a small motion detecting camera pointed at it. Days went by without incident. I felt some relief, thinking maybe the letters had stopped. But the moment I let my guard down, another envelope appeared. And that's when I noticed something strange. The letters seemed too precise, too consistent. They weren't slipping through the mailbox at random, they were always perfectly aligned, as if someone had studied the angle, the timing. My curiosity turned into unease. Something inside me whispered that it wasn't coming from outside at all. The breakthrough came when I checked the footage from my mailbox camera. My stomach dropped. No one ever approached the mailbox. Not a neighbor, not a delivery driver, nobody. The letters appeared in the frame, from inside the house. I replayed the video a dozen times, unable to breathe. They were being pushed through a thin slot in the wall, right behind my bedroom. I rushed to inspect it and found a small, barely noticeable opening, like a vent, but narrower, hidden behind a panel. I tore down the drywall in a frenzy, adrenaline mixed with terror, and discovered a small cubby, maybe 3 feet deep and just wide enough for a person to crawl inside. Inside was an old, dusty sleeping bag and stacks of letters, dozens of them, all addressed to previous owners. Every single one began with the same words, "Welcome home." My hands shook as I flipped through them. Some were decades old, the ink fading, others looked more recent. And buried at the bottom, a letter with my name, still blank, ready for the next edition. I couldn't comprehend it. Someone had been living inside the walls, observing the house for years, waiting silently for new tenants to move in. I called the police immediately. They searched the house, but of course, the intruder was long gone. Whoever had been living there was small, resourceful, and had vanished without a trace. They confirmed the slot and cubby were custom built, probably decades ago. I stayed at a friend's house that night, too afraid to sleep in my own bed. Even now, I can't stop thinking about the letters, the way they were crafted for me, personalized, watching, waiting. Every creak of my house, every shadow near my bedroom, makes my stomach knot. I eventually moved, but the paranoia followed me. I check vents obsessively, inspect walls for hidden spaces, and I swear, I can still feel eyes on me, like that tiny slot is somewhere, just out of sight, waiting for the next person to call this house home. I know it sounds insane, but I can't explain it otherwise. And I don't think I ever will. The letters weren't just paper and ink, they were a promise. A promise that someone had been here before, and they're always waiting. Some houses aren't empty, and some letters aren't meant to be found. If this story made you glance over your shoulder tonight, share your thoughts below. I read every comment, and I promise, you're not alone. Tap the like button if your heart raced, and subscribe to Jenny Noir, because the darkness I share is only just beginning. And remember, the next envelope could already be waiting for you.